So, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are, whenever you're able to catch this episode of In Conversation With. This is a In Conversation With in regards to private practice and success. And I'm absolutely delighted to be joined again by Siobhan Crosby, APA's CEO. Siobhan, thank you for joining us.
It's my role to be here. I'm glad to see you, and I'm extremely glad to see Dennis. I haven't seen him for a long time.
It's been a while. Dennis from Psychreg, who some of you will remember from an In Conversation With episode last year. Dennis, welcome back. How are you, sir?
I'm good, and thanks for having me here. It's been a while that we've last seen each other, but I'm glad that we could have a virtual conversation and catch up what's happening with us. And
it's been a phenomenal year for you. You had your international conference on psychology, counselling and education at the end of last year. How did that go?
Yeah, so normally I would just have the conference in person, but of course, because of the lockdown for the last 2 years, I have no choice but to just do it online. And so last year, I just did it online. There were a number of participants from Philippines, Malaysia, and elsewhere. And I really enjoyed, the process of learning with practitioners, with researchers. And hopefully this year I would be able to do another conference, but sadly it's looking to be another online event again.
Well, I can honestly say I associate Dennis because of the very first conference that we were invited to as APA in Borneo. So I see Borneo and Dennis, they're intrinsically linked in my head. You know, I think of one and you pop up. It was a brilliant event. You are such an incredible organizer, considering that was in Borneo, it was in Sabah University. What you achieved over there in the physical sense of the word, I just think you're absolutely incredible as an organizer to bring all of that together. And of course, it was a massive bonus for me and David because we got to explore the jungles of Borneo alongside doing a presentation. So it's a time I will never forget to the day that I die. So it was great to be involved in that, Dennis. You did an amazing job. You really, really did.
Thank you. And I'm quite sure that a lot of participants in Malaysia would also remember your presentation because a lot of the things that you said there actually resonates not just for the students, but also for the researchers themselves. So, it's also a memorable experience for the participants. And it's a pleasure having you on ICPC 2019.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for those that haven't seen the earlier conversation, Dennis, give people a bit of a rundown on yourself and Psychreg before we get kind of into the nitty-gritty of blogging and podcasts.
Yes, so I'm Dennis Relojo-Howell. So I'm best known for running Psychreg, which is an online platform on psychology, mental health, and wellness. So Psychreg is a media company that runs a website that also has a podcast on YouTube and also has an academic journal. So in a nutshell, that's what I do, of course, alongside organizing events. Yeah.
And when you see, you've done this for a while, and you see the knowledge that's being shared through Psychreg from researchers, from professionals, academics, there's a wealth of knowledge that kind of traditionally is hidden away, isn't there?
Yes, so just to give you a bit of an overview, so the starting point of Psychreg's trajectory was during, when I was doing my MSc at University of Hertfordshire. So I have a bit of a time, and so I thought, because I've always been a blogger, but I was a travel blogger, and so when I was doing my MSc, I thought like I should really look for a way where I could actually meld these two interests together, psychology and blogging. And so that's where the idea of launching Psychreg came from. And at first, Psychreg was just a hobby, and then later on, it became, you know, like my main job. And yeah, so I decided to kind of venture into other things, such as organizing conference.
Okay.
So I just want to say something because I think it's actually really important. The thing I love about Dennis and his blogging and his capacity to share education is the human side of Dennis. And there's one thing that will stay with me, Dennis, till the day I die. And it's an attribute that I think is important for every single person on the planet to truly work with within themselves. And that's gratitude. Dennis said a line to me, or maybe a line in an interview that I will not forget: having the ability to be grateful for what you have got rather than focus on what you haven't got, because of his own life experience of the Philippines right through to the UK and what that meant for him. That line will stay with me forever, because I do think gratitude will play a part in this discussion in relation to how we work with, even in relation to private practice, and the gratitude of the connections we can actually have. So I just wanted to bring that in there and remind Dennis of how much I actually listen to him, because the art of listening is one of the greatest arts of creating a private practice. So it's my conscious way of saying I hold information, and I wanted to say the information about Dennis that I will hold on to the day that I die. So thank you. We underestimate the impact of our words.
Yes. Yeah. So I always remind myself about the importance of gratitude, not to take things for granted. As you're probably aware, Siobhan, like, you know, sometimes we take things for granted, like things that we can do help, as in your case, being a cancer survivor, that probably things that, you know, like people who are cancer-free don't realize that it's a privilege to have. Since you brought it up, I suppose I just have to give a bit of a context about about the idea of gratitude. So I grew up in a slum in the Philippines. So my childhood was, you know, I grew up with no running water, with no electricity. I did not even sleep in a bed until I was about 16. But it's my experience is not really unique, because a good percentage of children in the Philippines, and probably of my generation, I was born in the 80s, have that childhood. But somehow along the way, I managed to find myself at university, although at 16, 17, I did not really think that going to university was for me, but it was for, because of a teacher, my high school teacher really encouraged me to, you know, to go to university and just, you know, look for a better job. So if somehow this would be broadcast on YouTube or Spotify, I'd like to give a shout out to Miss Lani Sarabia. I forgot her married name now, but it's been a while, probably 25 years ago. But yeah, she's one of those people who significantly changed my life. So for anyone who's listening, you know, like, it might just be a simple, you know, like, you know, conversation just like this, simple conversation with someone, but you'll never know how much impact you'll have in someone's life. And I could really say that without sounding cheesy, with my high school teacher, Miss Lani Sarabia. Yeah, so Ma'am Lani, if you're listening to this, I'm really grateful that you spend a lot of you know, time with me, not just as a teacher, but as a human being. And yeah, so since then, to cut the long story short, when I finished university, that started to change my life. And so, you know, like, especially when I moved here, it changed a lot. But I still remind myself of, you know, not to focus on things that I still don't have. You know, I don't live in £1 million house, but I'm still lucky because the house that I live now is way better than the house that I grew up in the Philippines.
You know, this is where you tapped into my personal perception of the art of a successful practice, which is really listening, hearing and feeling and having empathy and being with another human being. She treated you like a human being. And I think that is the secret ingredient of every single incredible relationship we can have, when we just are there to support, help, guide, hear the unsaid words between everything, and look at the impact she had on you by treating you as absolutely was appropriate, like a human being. And I think that's the thing that creates such a successful relationship that compounds wherever somebody is going to go in life. We never forget the people that treat us like a human being. So I'm bringing that in because it's the essence, in my opinion, of every successful private practice, every relationship that's out there that's therapeutic, every teacher's relationship with a pupil. It's all about being a human being to somebody else. And when that happens, magic happens, and your life is one of a magical journey of a real appreciation of what life gives you. So you will always touch me in that place, because to be honest with you, that's what I believe too. So we're on the same wavelength. So thank you for giving a backdrop to how you got to where you are. And I'm glad that that woman was in your life to be able to do that for you, because it's a scary thing being 16 and not knowing where your life is going, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think even in this country, even here in Britain, a lot of people are, still looking for role models, people that would encourage them. And it's really good that it doesn't have to be a role model. It doesn't have to be someone that you really know. It could be just like a therapist. That's why mental health professionals are there. And I suppose that right now we already have, generated enough conversations about mental health issues, especially with young people. And it's so good that, organizations such as APA really like, creating a vibrant community of mental health professionals. So anyone, whether you're a young person or, at a later stage of your life, if you want to have a conversation or have a talk to a mental health professional, you could get in touch with an organization such as APA.
One of the things that I think really, for me, kind of typifies everything that you've done, Dennis, and everything that Siobhan and I have put together with APA, and everything that Siobhan does in private practice, is maintain those connections and nurture those connections so that the information that's shared within them grows in its value over time. And blogging has been a way for you to share that knowledge, that understanding, and your experience. But for therapeutic professionals, there's almost a sense of, I don't know if I can, or I don't know if I should. But Psychreg has really showcased how sharing that has a massively positive impact, hasn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think people just don't realize how much, impact or how much connection you can establish if you just, try to create connection within social media platforms. I remember I've met Siobhan through Twitter, and who would know that just because of a single tweet, that our paths would cross, and then we would foster a long-term relationship, not just in a professional capacity, but, even in a personal level. So I think it's really important that if you have a therapeutic practice, you try to establish a good presence. And there's so many ways that you could do that without, because above all, you're not just, you're a therapist. So you shouldn't be spending your time, do I have to have a website? Do I have to have a blog? Just leave it to other people. So Well, when some people ask me, like, do I have to have a YouTube channel? Do I have to have my own blog where I could regularly publish an article? I always tell them it's really up to you. But I personally think that as a therapist, you should spend your time on things that you're really good at. You've been cast in a certain role. You're not cast on a role to be a blogger or to be a YouTuber. So if you want to be on YouTube, why not guest on the APA in conversation? Or if you want to write a blog, why not just guest post on Psychreg? That way you're not really spending too much time and energy in that, but you're still establishing a digital footprint.
And that's exactly the point. You nail it in your words, because when you work with clients from a place of human to human and really respect the clients you work with and care, for me personally, I can't not care about the people that I work with, because I respect them so much for their desire to want a more contented life and manage what they've been through to create something better for their future. And when you care and when you focus on that connection, that automatically creates an organic response over a period of time. Nobody sees me now and for years advertising my private practice. Nobody. You won't see me going, APS is here. And
except
the reason
just now.
for that, apart from that, but I haven't given out anything other than APS, and I've done that very deliberately, because actually I am fully booked every single week, and it's because of exactly what Dennis has just said. The ability to connect with your client as a human being above all else is the magical way forward. Throw in the training, throw in the expertise, throw in the understanding, but human to human is the secret ingredient. And if you haven't got that, if I'm honest with you, it's about looking at ourselves to understand what's going on. But if we have got that, the organic response from any client is to grow and develop, in the words of Carl Rogers, empathy, unconditional positive regard, and congruence. And you have that as a baseline therapy, an overall therapy, but ultimately about a human being connecting to them. So thank you, Dennis, because you echo my language.
Thank you.
One of the things that really sticks out is that the therapeutic professional does not have to do everything themselves. And to be truly successful in the human experience, we can't do everything ourselves. We know this. We have to connect to others. We have to work with others in order to grow that success. And for those that are in private practice, it's even more important, isn't it?
Yeah.
Dennis, the support that you give by allowing those professionals to, as you say, guest blog, and support them on that blogging process is phenomenal.
Thank you for acknowledging what I do on Psychreg. Yes, because I just want Psychreg to be a platform where people can actually have a wide range of perspectives when it comes to mental health, when it comes to the therapeutic process. And sometimes I get criticized for that, because when you try to not just frame a certain narrative, frame a certain perspective on your platform, people think that like you're a far right platform. I've been accused of that, or you're a transphobic platform because of who I interviewed on the DRH show. I'll give you a specific example. I don't know if you know Debbie Hayton, Dr. Debbie Hayton. So Dr. Debbie Hayton, she's a trans woman who says that trans women are actually men. So obviously this is quite a contentious issue, but I gave her the platform to to just air her opinion on why she says so. And after that, a lot of people want to remove the articles in Psychreg. At least 7 people asked me to do that, which I did. And just for, the spirit of neutrality, I also invited someone on the other side and asked them, why do they think that trans women are women? And then on the blogging area, I also published something about, why feminism is needed more in academia. But personally, I have a different take on things such as identity politics, and I have my own politics. You can't really disentangle that from people. We have our own politics, we have our own prejudice, but I try to remove that when I choose what to publish. So even though I don't agree with a lot of things that I publish in Psychreg, I still publish it. You would think that, when it comes to publishing an article within a industry, for lack of a better word, it's quite straightforward because it's just all about mental health. But a lot of things are actually very contentious, and I want to reflect the diversity of thought about Psychreg. You probably in a better position to speak about this, Siobhan and Dave, because you're in practice. You know the things that doesn't work well within these mental health organizations. But for me, there are different ways of looking at mental health, and I want to capture that. Just for instance, I'm really a strong advocate of resilience, and a lot of people criticize me that suffering in silence is actually not resilience. And I tell people that I'm not saying that you should suffer in resilience, but what I'm saying is you have to contextualize things before you say that I'm suffering from mental health issue and that I find this stressful. I've also been criticized for this because I'm doing a PhD now, and a lot of people just use the word stress very loosely. They say that I'm quite stressed by doing a PhD. And I say to people, well, I don't really say to people, but I discuss this with my husband, like, you know what, the easiest thing that you could probably do is spend time at university. And then I acknowledge that it has its own, challenges. But for you to say that you've got mental health issues because you're doing something at university, that's quite something. Because, come to think of it, like in another part of the world, there are people who are in Ukraine, for instance. I would acknowledge that they would have far, far more serious mental health issues than me. So I have those views, and sometimes I do get criticized, but I don't get it in the way with me creating a platform where everyone could find relevant information, whether it's about the lived experience of mental health, or whether as a practitioner, especially for people working at organizations such as APA.
Yeah. I'm going to say thank you, firstly, because your open-mindedness is exactly what I love about you. In the world of mental health, I personally believe we all can learn the art of agreeing to disagree, accepting that we all have our individual opinions and thoughts. And I mean, APA has been on the backlash of sharing one of your blogs as well. So we were instantly accused publicly of being anti-LGBTQ, et cetera, and in my head, I thought the whole world of mental health is, in my opinion, and ought to be, in my opinion, about acceptance of individual thoughts and opinions and feelings. And if we can't do that, then there's a bit of a problem. Yeah. So I am very well aware of being an organisation that gets criticised, especially when you bring up any issue that is slightly contentious or majorly contentious, whereas actually what you're doing is saying, here's somebody's opinion and they want to share their opinion. And that's important to acknowledge, that we ought to be able to agree to disagree and not to be attacking and criticizing. It's almost like trying to pull people apart on the basis of them simply having an opinion. So Thank you for that, because I completely agree with you, Dennis. And like I said, we've comfortably backed you and comfortably been berated for it too.
Yeah, thank you. And I also support my writer, although without going into the details for obvious reason, I've been challenged with libel because of one of the things that I publish on Psychreg. But I usually ask my writer, do you still want to stick with this article? Because I'm happy to, I'm happy to pull it out if you're not comfortable with, with the libel thread. But what I'm saying is that these are things that you have to consider when you would create a platform. So would you rather spend your energy creating a platform, or would you just rather have blog posts or guests on podcasts, and you can just concentrate on being a therapist? So that's something that you have to bear in mind, because creating a blog, creating a website takes a lot of resources. You have to pay for the domain, you have to pay for the hosting. Whereas if you're just doing it one-off, perhaps you're better off just writing for, publications. Of course, you're not just limited to Psychreg. You can write for all, for other publications.
But we absolutely advocate Psychreg, and we will always do that. 1, because of your open-mindedness. 2, because of your willingness to help. 3, you are so ridiculously quick. I know I've sent an article and within hours I've seen it online, and I'm sitting there going, wow, that was the quickest I've ever seen anything produced in my life. So your support to people is really important to acknowledge, because a lot of therapists have imposter syndrome. And especially when they're going into business, they're not business people, most of them. They're going in it from a therapeutic perspective. Well, that's great, but having a therapeutic perspective that widens to the business side of it and recognizes the nuances of business and how to work in a business, which is one of the reasons, just quickly, why we have a PA. We have PAs because every company out there, it takes you 20 minutes to get through, half an hour sometimes, to talk to a human being. Now, if you're a client ringing up, our ethos is, I want somebody to answer that phone to them immediately. I want a human being, not a robot at the end of that phone. And just that slight difference of knowing that somebody's holding my clients while I'm in appointments gives me the opportunity, 1, not to miss a call, but ultimately my clients are not speaking to an answer machine. I think it's the worst thing for a client that is ringing up about something incredibly distressing. Most of them won't leave a message on an answering machine, and getting back to that person ASAP is part of the business side of good service. So you're giving a platform in an incredible way, and it's an opportunity for anybody to express themselves, support themselves, break through that imposter syndrome that's very often there, in a gentle way, by going to you and allowing you to help them break that miniature bit in themselves that says, I can't do this, because actually they can. Because the information's in their head. It's about confidence at letting it out and doing it through you. My personal opinion is I'll always advocate you, because you're wonderful with people.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's just to go back to what one point that you said there earlier, that I'm quite quick. I'll just reveal to you my secret. I have a small team who actually helps me. So I have to acknowledge Rona, Dina, and Graham, who's actually doing some of the legwork for me. Even the videos that I upload on YouTube, it's my husband who's actually doing most of the work. So I think the key message here is that you have to delegate, because there's just so much time in a day. So if you're a therapist, you don't have to manage your social media platform. Someone can do that for you. Or you want to establish yourself as a thought leader, aside from being a therapist, where there are ways of doing that without actually, you doing the legwork.
It's called communication, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Because that's ultimately what you're talking about in every single area. Everything is about communicating with somebody else. And as you say, we met through one platform, through one post, and look what happens. Because if you meet the right people in your life, everything organically expands. And as for teamwork, I'm pulling your words out and thinking it's just so perfect, because actually it's teamwork in the therapeutic setting as well. It's not I'm up there and my clients are beneath me. Mm-hmm. I know there's a power imbalance and they feel the power imbalance. I'm fully aware of that, and it's up to me to address that. But my role is to have us here, because ultimately as two human beings, I accept them completely. But working as the team, because enough people will say to a really good therapist, I couldn't have done it without you. And I sit there and I say, I really appreciate that, but I can honestly be absolutely useless, because if you don't work with me, mm-hmm. then there's no point. So we're working together. And I will always give that back to a client, because without them doing the work, mm-hmm. nothing will change. So mm-hmm. it is teamwork. So it's just pulling up on your teamwork and delegating. So yes, can't do anything without each other.
I just want to pick up on something that you picked up, Dennis, regarding the sharing of multiple voices. And in the world of mental health over the last decade or so, we've had an awful lot of kind of channeled voices, a lot of modality bias, and it's almost who shouts loudest gets heard most. Mm-hmm. And we've seen this across, it's not just the mental health arena, and I accept that. This is the way our social structure has moved in recent times. But what you've done with Psychreg is to take those silos down and say, if we want to really know and understand something, then we need the choir of voices. We don't need the soloist. Mm-hmm. And this is very much where APA has come from, in the sense that we do not take identity as a benchmark for how somebody is treated or how somebody is engaged with or how somebody is experienced. We take the experience of everybody and we work with their presentations. Our equal opportunities policy is one of them, according to the American Civil Rights team, is exactly what Martin Luther King Jr. was advocating, because we don't ask people to identify themselves in any other way than are they human or are they not? Mm-hmm. And if someone ticks that box that says they're not human, we're going to have a really amazing conversation. Mm-hmm. But it's about sharing all of the knowledge and all of the understanding so that we can all learn and we can all grow.
Mm-hmm. Now, I do want to come in here and just back up what David said, but I think it's important to acknowledge that it's really important, as much as we accept people for who they are, that we acknowledge their cultural background, we acknowledge their identity and their feelings about their identity. We take into account religious backgrounds, because all of that plays a part in somebody's psychology and how they've developed. I want to make it very clear, as much as we do not put people into boxes, it does not mean we don't take into account their personal experiences. As a therapist, I speak for myself, I will always include that cultural dynamic and that background, because it is so important to that person's individual identity. But as for APA, we come from a place of anyone can join us. We don't mind who you are as long as you go through our assessment process and that is successful, because we are not in the habit of saying this member believes in this box, so we're going to put them over there. That's not how APA works. As the therapist, I just wanted to slip in there before somebody jumps on David and says, they don't take into account cultures. We absolutely do. Yeah. And it's really important to acknowledge that.
Yes. Yeah. Thanks, Von. Dennis, when we're talking about people in private practice, being able to delegate and build that platform of their presence across social media, through blogging, through guest podcasts, etc. Do you think there is a value in that being right from the very beginning of their move into private practice? Or do you think, as a lot of professionals do, I can't say anything yet because I've only just started?
I think it would be better that it would, coincide with your experience. So what I'm saying is that if you're starting, then you could, if you're starting as a therapist, then you could also start shaping your digital footprint. And I think that's something that we really have to be mindful about, because everything is all online now. So, when you encounter a therapist, aside from checking whether you're a member of an organization such as APA or BACP or what have you, people also Google you. And it's difficult for people to have a, kind of form a positive impression of you if they can't find anything about you online. And that's where these, online resources, the Psychreg and YouTube comes in. So I would say, to answer to your question, Dave, is that, when you're starting your practice, I think you should, that should be the starting point as well when you try to establish your online presence.
Yeah.
And it's also good that you're kind of giving people, establishes people's expectation of who you are as a therapist. Just like you, Dave, you've published I would say about 4 articles in Psychreg, although it does not really capture your theoretical framework. It's enough for people to understand like what sort of therapist Dave is. And also Siobhan, with my interview with you on DRH show on YouTube, of course, it's not really enough to capture what kind of therapeutic style you advocate for. But when people hear your story, your narrative, they could have at least like a basic idea, like, is this the kind of person that I want to share my life story, my journey? So I think it's really important that at such an early age of your career as a therapist, you try to establish your presence online.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you, because once again, it goes back to almost like the secret ingredients of a private practice. And one is sharing. Mm-hmm. Sharing, communicating, appreciation, working on your confidence levels to actually recognize you can write something and it will be accepted for what it is, because you're not biased in any way when you publicize things. If anything, you go for what I would call the almost contentious views. And what's really interesting about that is we're in the field of mental health. If we're sitting in front of a client that has a contentious viewpoint, our role absolutely ought to be able to work with that client's viewpoint rather than actually decide that they're wrong, they need to change, they need to be criticized. So that's where I see when people criticize Psychreg for producing an article in any way, shape or form, my viewpoint is, I wonder what's going on for that person that they actually feel the desperate need to criticize and pull that article to bits, because actually it's an opinion, it's a thought, it's a belief, it's somebody's feelings. Mm-hmm. And if we can't identify with that without pulling people apart, then there's something, in my honest opinion, that needs to change. So you almost highlight. It's almost like you go, here, rip your ass off, show us what you're really made of, because I'm just about to put an article out there. And actually, it's not my opinion, but I'm allowed and encouraging other people to have their opinion. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a great way, because it actually reveals a lot of people for who they are. It actually allows the mask of them to slip on social media when they react with major criticisms. Because personally, I wouldn't work with a therapist that criticized anybody repeatedly, because my thought would be, what are they doing with a client that they perceive is not fitting into their box of expectation? So I love what you do. I think bring it on, show yourself what you're capable of doing, and you provide a brilliant platform. So if we had to summarize your version of using blogging to create a private practice in the most successful way, what would it be, Dennis? What's your recommendations?
Just try to just try to be genuine with what you write and what you present in public, because ultimately people would link that to what kind of therapist you are. So it's better to be open to people what what kind of therapeutic practice you believe in and what's your approach in dealing with clients, and that will reflect in your podcasts, in your writing.
And David, what would you think?
I would say start early, start pre-launch. Mm. Let people know who you are and let them know why you are and what you do. The who, the what, and the why are the three big anchors for anybody to connect with anybody else. And whether, like myself, that's in the coaching arena, or Siobhan in the therapeutic arena, the same is true. So work out who, the what, and the why are for you as an individual, and make that your first launch into this is setting the tone for what my private practice will be once I get there. And then look at who those collaboration partners are that work in the same vein as you do, but never ever isolate your view into one channel. Read as much as you can, challenge views that don't agree with your thought pattern, but learn that thought pattern. Learn what it is that other people are saying and why are they saying it. Mm-hmm. And going back to the article that you mentioned around transgender, the argument around transgender and DNA, no operation changes DNA. Mm-hmm. And DNA is binary. Mm-hmm. Unfortunately, that's the way the human existence is. And there are those that will accept the DNA and work with that. And there are those that will find that hard because they're still working through the DNA is unchangeable.
Mm-hmm. I just want to pick up on that. It might be slightly off tangent, but in my case, whether it's a contentious issue, I really try to make my opinion private about it. It's just that people misinterpret or misrepresent what they see on Psychreg. They did not realize that I'm actually trying to be neutral because I invited both parties. And it's just so happened that sometimes one party is far more engaged in explaining their side of the story. So it just so happened that I invite people, because there are things which would divide people in mental health. And, the issue about trans people are actually one of those. And if you probably scour articles on Psychreg about transgender issues, then you probably see that it's about nearly 50-50, the kind of articles that I published there.
And for me, I'm hearing you, and I totally agree with you about just allowing people, because when I hear the word division, I think that's exactly where my head goes to. Why do we have to be divided over an opinion over what somebody else feels and thinks? Mm-hmm. Each person has their right to think and feel what they do, as long as they are not hurting somebody else, mm-hmm. they're not damaging themselves. Mm-hmm. And as long as we follow that rule of thinking, then personally speaking, anybody ought to be entitled to how they think and feel, because that's the nature of the human race. We ought to be. So I really appreciate you coming on and talking about how you feel. And I am well aware, because like I said, I know that divisions are created. But for me, in the world of mental health, it's that division that needs to be removed, and the awareness to be able to say, I actually think about that person's opinion, and actually they might teach me something. Let's not reject and let's not criticize, because ultimately, who has the right to judge another for how they walk in their own shoes? And I'll always come come back to that ethos, because that's how I am. And that's part of why my own practice is actually as successful and so diverse in the people that come and see me, because I do accept them for who they are, which is right for me. So thank you for bringing that divide, because that divide really needs to change.
Yeah, absolutely. I know we're running short of time, but just a quick note, because I don't want a mental health publication to be like, you know, like if you're Labour voter, you will be reading The Guardian. If you're a Conservative voter, you will be reading The Telegraph. But mental health doesn't have to be like that. We have to, you know, we have to meet at a point. I'm not going to name any publications, but you know that there's some publications even by organizations which are heavily leaning to one side of the story, and I don't want Psychreg to be like that.
And you've managed to keep that kind of neutrality. And if one party, as you say before, doesn't want to engage, then that's their choice to not engage. That's not a reference on Psychreg. And I think, you know, for those that are going into private practice, by being able to guest post, by being able to do guest blogs, by being able to be guests on podcasts such as this, it gives that opportunity for them to get their voice, and the more voices that we have talking about mental health, the better.
And I just want to finalize and wrap up one thing just before David does his end bit, which I absolutely love. This is why, in my opinion, myself and Dennis's practice and the way that we work actually does work, because organically, when you accept people, you organically get a response, and that acceptance translates ironically into the success most people are actually frightened of having. So it's the acceptance of people and different thoughts and opinions that organically creates a successful private practice. It creates a successful blogging platform. So if people understood about themselves to make sure that that is where they're coming from in their heart and soul, and that comes from, in my opinion, fantastic self-awareness and the ability to accept another human being for who they are. That's the secret. Get that secret under your belt. The rest will naturally develop and grow. So David, please wrap up what we're doing in this wonderful interview with Dennis. We could talk to Dennis all day long, and I'm fully aware of that, but I also know he's got something to do in an hour. So, which I'm not saying any more about right now.
Dennis, I want to say a massive thank you for sharing with APA again. And as always, the openness that you share stands out head and shoulders above everything else. So a massive thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
So if you have gained from this conversation, then believe it or not, you can get a CPD for it. All you have to do is click the link in the description for the video. Let us know what it is that you've gained, and then you'll get the CPD. APA does not give CPD without validation, but that validation is in your hands, not ours. So we will see you in another episode of In Conversation With very, very soon. And we can announce today that one of those episodes will be a special with Siobhan on her experience of going from training into private practice without some of the historic barriers and conditions that may have been put in place for others. So it's a great opportunity to find out from the head of APA what their experience in private practice has been. And I really look forward to that conversation. But for now, take care. Dennis, Siobhan, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dennis. Thank you, David. Take care.